Yeah, what's up, guys? So I just wanted to record a quick video about spiritual practices because, again, it's some things. These things are coming out of the woodwork all over the place, and I just wanted to put in my opinion, or not my opinion, my experience of what the use is, if any, and what type of practices are actually useful and what they do in terms of the process of becoming self-liberated. So, as a background, I was studying philosophy in the West. I got to the point where I could see there was some massive holes that were impossible to account for or even acknowledge in the university system. And at that point, I said, okay, well then, teaching philosophy is not going to be my thing. It's not a waste of my time, but it's not going to lead to my most freedom. So I said, okay, I'll go and start making my own business. So when I started doing business, but I obviously thought I need to return to philosophy because I'm going to find answers to the questions. But just not in school, in a university. I'm not saying university philosophy courses are great. No, some of them are. I don't know about all of them, but the one I went to was actually great. Learning the history of thinking in terms of when you are given an opinion on a plate when you're growing up, it's good actually to then chart the history of that and see how those thoughts have emerged and evolved, because the way that collectively we work is very much like how we work in our brains work. It's just like a collective unconscious, right? So we start with one lesson that we learn, we figure something out, and then that unfolds into many more understandings. And it's the same with the collective understanding of our collective belief systems that we live in, at least in the West and in the East as well. If you look at intellectual history, or you take a chronological approach and look at ideas along a chronological framework, then you get a much clearer picture of where you're at, and what are the key aspects of these beliefs. And also you can see where the issues are that are leading to your personal problems, because we're all a product of our thoughts, right? So that being the case, I was doing my business thing, and I sort of had this sense things were working out, but I was getting very angry, and I realized that actually the reason I'm getting annoyed with people is because this is pointless. This is all stupid. I'm getting too emotionally involved in things that are just completely just consequential. They're inconsequential. These business matters are just of the body and are just of these. For me, it's not deep enough that I get annoyed with people because they don't understand what I'm talking about, and then I get really frustrated and I'm like, wait, the problem is that what I am meant to do is to be pursuing the immaterial gains, not material gains. So now that my situation is basically all right enough, I can see that things are fine and everything will be all right, then I'm going to go back to doing what I was doing. At which point I, looked into it. I was like, all right, so where am I stuck? And I found a book that was actually written by a friend's dad who was a very extremely mystical character, and who, made a huge effect in the world in that respect. And in the first line of his book was, the problem with the West is the understanding of time. And I was like, holy shit, that's exactly where I left off. Time's wrong. The way that we see time is wrong. That causes all the issues, many of the issues in our thinking that lead to a lot of suffering, which I'll have to take a long time to get into. But anyway, his book, he happened to create a form of system of astrology. So I thought, oh, actually, yeah, so I need to learn about astrology. That guy's dead, so I couldn't do that. And I thought, this is crazy. I was looking online, and it's just a bunch of just mumbo jumbo that I didn't see any credence to, because I couldn't see the character who actually knew what they were on about and had this mystical understanding of time that I wanted to understand. And then this is, when things sort of got really interesting. No, things have been very interesting up until then, but this was a very interesting moment, which was on the night of my daughter's birth. A man came up to me and at the hospital asked me for a cigarette, and then we just started chatting, and there was sort of an unspoken connection. And he was old. He had an infection in his leg. He had no friends, no family. Lived in a caravan in a nondescript location, which is sort of normal where I live. There's a lot of dirt roads and things like that, places that aren't marked. And he lived in one of those. And I said, hey, let me come and help you out. And if whatever. And he told me where I lived. Neither of us had a phone, ironically, so we couldn't make any sort of that connection. And that way, he just told me where he lived, described this to me, and I was like, all right, cool. I actually forgot, but the next day I was still in the hospital, and so was he, and I bumped into him again, and he looked at me and he had this sort of funny look. He'd forgotten who I am, started speaking in another language, because I live in another country where they speak another language. And then it's like he clicked, and he realized, because I'd gone up to him because I'd forgotten where he lived. I forgot this. I was like, wait, where did he say he lived? And before he looked at me again, and before I even said anything, he said, No, I live in, he told me where I lived, which was, I was like, see, read my mind? And he looked at me again, dead in the eye like this. And he's like, you're a Taurus. And I was like, what? And he's like, yes, I'm very glad I met you. And I was like, this is crazy. Because I had literally I was like, I need to figure out how to learn astrology. So, long story short, this is interesting how these things emerge. And this is for me why I was like, oh shit, there's more to it than I thought. Because I'd met people who talked a lot, who've been in all of this new agey stuff, and we had arguments, and I was like, you're fucked up, this is stupid, what you're saying is completely self-aggrandizing ego trip, and you have no idea what you're talking about, and I can show you why. But in this case, I was like, okay, well, this is expanding my understanding of what's possible. So this guy comes up, and back up, this is the night of my daughter's birth, so I had agreed to sort of meet this guy within like sort of 10 days or something. But it didn't work out that way. It was much more hectic than I expected, and I didn't end up making it back to where he lived for a month. And when I got there, the owner of the land that the caravan was on, because I was like, hey, is the guy living in this caravan? He's like, yeah, that guy died. I was like, oh, what? He's like, yeah, no, he died. I was like, okay, but since I knew this guy had no friends, no family, he said, I'm happy to meet you. I knew he was training in this sort of stuff, and I'd done enough sort of background research in Hermetic studies to understand that these people that need to pass on this information. It was just a sort of a core knowing. So I was like, all right, well, the guy walked away because he's like, don't care. He was just some sort of character who you probably wouldn't imagine. Not strange, but just sort of sketchy character who you wouldn't see in sort of organized society. Just sort of walked off, and I was like, all right, fuck it, I'm going in. I went into the caravan, and I saw these all this stuff laid out, right? And it's interesting because I was like, I had the thought in my head, he must have left stuff for me because he doesn't have any students, he has no families, no friends, but I know he's trying to pass on this information. That's why he looked me dead in the eye, because he'd already told me other stuff like that he was a holistic doctor, and he told me many things that made me believe, okay, this is the guy who's going to teach me something that I don't know, that I need to understand, that's a missing link in all this stuff that doesn't make sense. Where are these other things that I'm seeing that I don't get any confirmation for, because I only see crazy people who've read a book and now they think they're fucking spiritual gurus. So I took all the stuff, and it was interesting because on top of this, the set of books at Creighton with all these books and journals and all sorts of stuff, and on top of it was a little pyramid triangle, glass pyramid with that said Capricorn in it. I was like, I had no idea what that meant. Later I found out that my daughter's birth sign was a Capricorn, and I was like, oh my god, that's so crazy. He left it there. It's just, so I knew, because he understood that I'd just been learning. I'd just been started getting downloads of all this sort of Hermetic information, and that I could help him in this stuff that I'm not going to get into now. Okay. So he's passed away, and I come back and I get all these books, and not only books, all this crazy stuff, like really crazy stuff, like things like massive crystals and a wand, a crystal. I'm not going to describe how it's built because I don't know how, but a very elaborate crystal wand made with copper wire and sealed pieces of mercury and very elaborate with all sorts of inscriptions in it and crazy stuff. And I'm not going to explain until I know really what the deal is with it. And this was years ago. This was 4 years ago now. It's taken anyway. On top of that, there was a number of books which were all underlined with little notes and whole handwritten, seriously, like very detailed, long handwritten books about things of astrology. But the funny thing is, I didn't really need to read much of this stuff for my mind to explode. All these crazy information, full on, boom, I'm in. Now the world is a totally different place. Because suddenly I'm like, oh my god, this isn't what I thought it was. Although before that I'd already for a number of, probably a couple of years, been noticing synchronicities, and this stuff started to make sense to me, and I was like, oh yeah, okay, actually it's different. But this was another step in that, because it's like there was all sorts of stuff about other levels of reality and dimensions and things that I wasn't completely. The thing is, I didn't have any information to say that this is the case. So I was like, look, the only people I've heard just saying this stuff are not only insanely egomaniac, but they're trying to manipulate people and me, and using this stuff as a self-aggrandizing tool to try and get other people to listen to them and to manipulate and have negative, get bad stuff. So I was like, I was very wary of this sort of thinking, because I can see that it feeds into egotism and lunacy and bad morals. So yeah, this was just crazy, and I had all this stuff, and I realized now I was like, all right, well, now I've got another problem. Like, what the fuck? How am I going to make any sense of this? Because he's passed away. As I'm reading these books, I'm getting information downloaded, and I'm thinking all this stuff. But how I need to find somebody who knows this stuff to actually show me what the deal is with it. Because I have my evidence that this stuff really exists, and there's another level to stuff that I don't get. And this is having spent like a very long time looking really seriously at what's going on in the world and trying to find the true reality of nature of reality. So at that point, I'd been looking on YouTube, obviously, and doing my research, and I'd seen a Taoist. I'd found a person who I could see was authentic in their understanding. They knew something, and I could see it. Like, you can see it in people, you can see it. And so I messaged him, and I said, hey, look, I've received all this information and all this stuff, and I think I know what's going on, but I need someone to show me exactly what the fuck is going on here. Then he taught me, and I began learning Taoist internal alchemy, and I don't want to go into the fucking words of it. Tai Chi, Qigong, there is a old practice that is deep rooted in history, which is not just in China. It's also in India, in the yogas. It's also probably in many. Doesn't matter. This is the common running thread that you will see if you know what I'm talking about. If you're the person who's this video is meant for, and you probably come across a lot of this stuff yourself. So let me just give you my brief take on it. Right, there are many layers to this process. One part of it, there's in the yogas they say there's four paths to enlightenment, and I'm not saying I'm enlightened. I'm not saying that probably anyone is. I don't know what that means personally, so I'm not going to go there. But this is what I understand from these practices, because I realize that I've done many of these different training programs just through my experience in life. Right? There's the intellectual breakthrough, right? Which is where you study so much. This is where you look at the world and you look at all the information that's around, and you create this really complex picture of the separate entities and the images and their interconnections. And then at some point you realize the extent of it, right? And the layers and all this stuff. That's an intellectual breakthrough. You go from looking at the world and language and all this stuff and getting all this truth to realize that the truth is different than what you thought it was, and you have this breakthrough where suddenly you need less research. There's a breakthrough of devotion where you're so amazed, where you go no thoughts, just deeply in love with the world, just feeling that pure love of being alive and interacting with nature and traveling, and more just in nature itself. That's devotion. Then there's the physical route, right? This is kung fu, and I'm explaining why all these things these all are necessary aspects of the character that can lead to these higher and higher levels of truth. The physical practices, this is discipline. This is about and this is what was part of my training. Because although I've been very disciplined intellectually, physically, I've always been in good shape. No, not great shape. I've never been go to the gym and shit like that. But I'm physically, like, I used to hike a lot and walk a lot and swim and stuff, because I've made an effort to go places where I'm not too trapped. But I've had habits. I started smoking when I was like fucking 9 years old. This thing's crazy. And drugs and alcohol and all that, and my energetic makeup is slightly imbalanced just from history, and also from I'm not going to say genetics, but like when you grow up in a family where people are fucking drinking alcohol and all day and every day and smoking millions of cigarettes and shit like that, stressing all day and eating crap food, then of course you learn those habits, and that affects the way that your body forms itself when you're a teenager, kid and stuff. So I had all that going, and but yes, so for me, the important bit in this was to learn about, in the Chinese teachings. For me, that was something I needed. It was very helpful. The discipline, the practice, and learning about things that I don't know if I'm going to necessarily talk about in this video. The nature of energy and how to use that to be a master of your own body. Because again, think about this. In order for the world to work out, for us to get to a point of harmony and peace with each other and everything, we all need to be masters of ourselves, of our emotions. In order to be a master of your emotions, you need to be master of your body, because one of these very true core facts is that when you have imbalances in physical issues, it affects your mood. You can't be happy. You can't think clearly. If you've got problems with your liver, you can have a lot of anger issues. There's all these things that we're just don't know about enough. But the fact is, clean body, clean mind, healthy body, happy mind, all these things, it's a reality. Another part of this is your ethics and how do you go about the world, because if you're being selfish, you're being greedy, all these sorts of stuff, then again it causes these imbalances you can't see clearly. If your desire, it comes down to your intent. You have to really be intent upon getting to the truth. You have to be intent upon being I can't even actually put a word to what you have to focus on, because I think it's something that you need to understand for yourself. But intent means that in your core drive is to get to a certain point. So if people want to, like, if people see that there's some sort of thing nowadays about seeming spiritual or whatever, then their intent is actually to seem that way. So they're not going to get to the core of what it is actually that you have to do, which requires a lot of fucking not suffering, but yeah, it's suffering. You have to pass through difficult trials, and you have to overcome yourself more than anything. But if you have if you understand that there is only one, there's only one route to transcendence. You can jump around, you can have things and get like momentary releases and highs and stuff, but like, from acquisition and from sex and all that shit and lording it over people and manipulating people, but that's very short-lived, and it always needs to be reiterated. But for anyone who's really going for the core, I'm not going to say best or anything, because I think anyone to say it's the best way to live is just attracting the wrong crowd to it. To achieve what we call liberation, or to succeed in the spiritual path, or if there is such a thing, requires the intent to really do it. And it requires that you address many aspects in your life first, and all geared towards the fullest image of the real world as it is, which requires or living in accordance with nature as well, which requires very healthy diet, strict diet, getting up early. It's funny because you see these very successful people, they all do this morning routine, and I thought that was funny because I learned about that after I started training, my training, in which I get up every morning, sometimes 3 a.m, meditate, exercise, qigong, tai chi, connecting to not only nature but the other layers of the mind, in order to create a condition, physical and mental, long enough that it can stick, that is on another, it's different. So let me wrap it up, because I just want to, Sadhguru is, and I threw his name out, check him. I'm sure you guys have heard of him. I can see that he knows what's up. And it was interesting, I just saw this one video, it's a couple minutes long, where he describes something that they do, this an ancient practice that he does every year, but he doesn't advertise it because it's not for everyone. But this is my best description that I've seen of this thing it's in many cultures and in many places, and this is how it works. You go through, it can happen enough that this is like the Internal Alchemy Foundation program as well. It can take 3 to 6 months, or it can take a couple of years, but what it is this strict program of physical, mental, and behavioral, in terms of your ethics and what you do and how you treat people and how you treat your own mind, training that's intensive, and it's every day on day, in terms of strictly controlling your diet. It's a purification process in an intense way, and the alignment, say physically, of your body, because you need to have literally certain alignments. Your spine has to be very straight, certain things like this. You're physically strong, your organs have to be healed, you have to be purified, and then emotionally purified, physically strong. And then with the right types of meditation during this program, the way that they describe it in India is that you create a vessel in which a deity can enter, and you do it long enough so that once that happens, then you have the strength that you can do something great, and your own negative tendencies aren't going to get in the way and stop you. That's basically how he described it. And in India, they use the word deities. They don't do any of that in Chinese, which I find is a little bit more, well, it doesn't matter, they're all different, but it's basically describing the same thing, where in internal alchemy, it's the idea of upgrading your energy, and it's a very real thing. And I'm not going to get into too much about this, but I will eventually train people in this, but not at this point, or people can message me and we can speak, and it's not about withholding information. It's just I don't think it's very useful, because people get caught up in all this stuff, and I did myself, thinking, oh, alchemy, and you read all this stupid crazy shit and all these old texts, and you have no fucking clue what you're talking about, and it distracts you from actually getting to the point. And I'm lucky that I only discovered the term alchemy. No, I only really looked into the term alchemy like a month or two before I actually was introduced to someone who could show me, because that's what I was looking for, because my intent was to know, not to feel like I'm so fucking great for be talking a bunch of words. And I'm not saying that, no, I'm not making immortality tinctures, although I have spoken with someone who apparently claimed to have done so, and I've seen that that's come up a couple of times on the internet right now, so I'm interested in that. But according to my teacher, he's like connected thousands of years back to the source of internal alchemy, says that, you know, the external alchemy, in terms of making these immortality pills, which they talked about all over the world, which is not, it's not mumbo jumbo, it's for real. Well, I don't know that, so I don't think it's mumbo jumbo. But according to the oldest sources in China, these sort of recipes were lost a number of thousand years ago, because they were condemned by the controllers. Because guess what? They were being controlled. So it would be pretty annoying if everyone was just flying around like fucking mystics, doing whatever they want, living off of nature, needing no control, not being able to be controlled, looking at people, laughing, flipping them over without touching them. And I don't want to get into all that, but I'm sure in time we'll eventually be talking more about this stuff, but I just don't want to, because at this point, because it's distracting from the actual point. And yes, but you know there's energy. Everyone knows there's energy. This is your mood, your emotions. These are all energy. This is a fact. And yes, it's a fact. Go and research Kung Fu masters and see the stuff that they can do. That's real. It's a real thing. It's not magic. It's discipline, practice, training, and the right intent. Like, interestingly, Carlos Castaneda, anyone's interested in that, it's Toltec way. They're more focused just on the reality changing aspects, where because again, yeah, like Seneca was saying, there's many dimensions to it. There's the mind, right? And there's understanding that reality is not just this fixed everyday waking reality, waking state, that there's a number of other states, you know. And the Toltec, they focus more, you know, they focused on getting people into the state where they can understand the access, and they can transcend just the waking state and see the more subtle states, and then influence those, affect those. But again, he describes that they do a lot of physical exercise too. It's like if you were to go and do training with a South American shaman, you're working all day outside collecting wood. You're living like a subsistence life. It makes you very healthy, and it also makes you very connected to nature. So you don't necessarily need to go and do these practices. In China, they use Kung Fu, but they also do Tai Chi, Daoyin, and all this stuff. And they have another level to it, which is probably exists in many places, but I see that they've kept it, because you get, you know, like I didn't even know what Reiki was before this, but Reiki apparently is, you know, sort of sending energy stuff. So yeah.